Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mark for Glory podcast. I'm Mark, and this is Krystal.
Hi.
And we're recording episode number 35 of season 2. I think we said last time that we were on episode 35, but this is actually episode 35. But today we're speaking with Mary Collins, who has MS and has been on quite a journey discovering different health things that have been working for her. So she's going to talk about that and about her journey. So let's get started. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Krystal.
Just a minute. We'll wait for this lawnmower.
Keep a lawnmower going on over here. I out the door.
Yeah.
So we can edit this out. We can edit out anything we want. But if you don't like the way you explain something or we explain something, just tell us and hey, pause.
Okay.
That out.
Some things we like to leave in for authenticity's sake because we're disabled people and we don't want to try and put out this polished perfect thing, and then people are left wondering what disability is really. But having said that, we would certainly, if you wanted to cut something out, we'd certainly honor that.
So we have filmed a lot of, that the past generation, the last 15, 20 years or so, has been more of like people telling other people to fake it until you make it.
Right.
Well, we think it should be like face it and embrace it, And so we want people to see, yes, we have to do so, and we have to do things over and over and over until we, get it how we need it. But we don't always have to correct everything. And society as a whole wants us to be perfect or wants us to fit their normal life. And we want to show people you don't have to do that.
Right.
Well, plus, you're real people having a real conversation with another real person. This isn't some kind of slick TV production or something. So I appreciate authenticity.
Yeah. It's great. So I know this keeps coming in and going out.
I can't hear it at all.
Really?
Oh, good.
Okay. Cool. Okay. But I mean, Krystal is right. We can't edit anything, but editing a lawnmower out from over our conversation might be problem. So I'd rather just wait until I know it's gone.
I'm pretty sure Zoom can block it out.
Yeah, right.
But because we have speech issues, and we have to use mics and to pick up our enunciation and stuff like that. And we're not sure if this is going to pick up.
Yeah,
I hear you.
Right. Right. And it's better in this case, it's better to be safe than sorry. We don't want to do all this good work and then go back to editing and find out, oh, here's the lawnmower.
We don't want to message you and be like, how did that work? I couldn't hear any of it.
Yeah, because no one, I mean, then it just becomes a big, I mean, you're busy and we're busy, and sometimes it's tough to get motivated to do stuff, especially if you did it great the first time, then you have to do it over again. And yeah. Anyways, what do you?
You're going further away.
Okay.
So as I said, I can't hear it at all, so I'll have to wait for you guys to give me the signal.
Okay. So should I do the intro again, or should we just? It's coming back. It's coming back now. Or?
I used to have a thing that you remember payphones, right? Before we had cell phones. I would
Yeah.
have, I would have to make an important business call on on a payphone somewhere. And it would be perfectly quiet, just some sort of back street of a business area. And then all of a sudden the blower guy would come with the leaves. And it was happening to me almost every single time. And I thought, what is this? Well, how did I summon this guy? Just when I was trying to.
Yeah. No, I'm speaking this thing on the fella. So let me know when you
Oh, well,
still hanging around.
give them like a few minutes.
Yeah. So what's let us know, is there anything that's been happening in your world since we last talked?
Yeah, a couple of things. This morning, I signed up for an online level 1 training in what's called QHHT. It's a form of hypnosis that was developed by a woman named Dolores Cannon. You may or may not know of her. She passed away a few years ago. But I've been really interested in past life regression and different kind of interesting modalities of healing. And I was really attracted to her particular method because I had heard her describe how she went through the sort of conventional training and then got some ideas on how to change it. So I signed up for that today and I've been working on it a good bit of the day. And, it's going to take some time, but I sort of see that as a tool in the toolbox.
Well, that's interesting.
Helping people sort of maybe on a subconscious level, either releasing something or can be just stress or whatever. But so
Right.
just getting started on that. And otherwise, there's been a lot of things happening with my local food farm connection. They've been doing some good classes and getting very excited about the collaborations that are happening there on trying to do things that are more local and more community based. So that's pretty much it.
It's always the way to go, we've sort of been brainwashed and conditioned away from that by the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And and it's hard to do sometimes, especially like living on a budget. You want to be, we know that eating locally is like the healthiest, but it's not always affordable, right? And yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's true. And I'm a big advocate of our local farmers market. Happens every Saturday morning. And I just found out that they're doing a lot of development and projects downtown. And so it's supposed to move into this new smart park that they're creating. And I just found out from the manager of the market that they are now saying, oh gosh, we're not sure if we have room for this, which is really their way of saying that we don't think that this is exciting enough or something that enough people are participating in, which is kind of disappointing and sad to me because we can't stay where we are. Anyway, and this was kind of for 2 years, they've been saying, oh, look how great this is going to be, when you're going to be there and you'll be right next to all these new apartments and people will be just coming out and shopping. And so I don't know, my husband says I'm ahead of the curve, which I take as a compliment, but sometimes it's a little hard waiting for other people to get it.
No, it is really, we're learning that right now. Like, we're just like, okay, let the world figure out what the heck it's doing.
Right.
Then put us back in the big fiasco mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's, the last couple of years have been, for me, actually an opportunity to think about what's important and what's not important. And I've been a little bit surprised how many people I know are just wanting to get like back, let's get back to normal.
Yeah.
It's like, what is normal?
Yeah. No, it's been a interesting, but there's the whole COVID thing, and that was 2 years. And then pretty much a lot of the stuff that happened from that allowed people to see all the stuff going on that was wrong, and all the injustices and all the stuff that didn't make sense, pretty
Yeah.
much. And so now people are kind of, trying to get right, or trying to put new things in place because they figured out, who people are and what they're about. And it's kind of, so we're just being patient, waiting for people to get their stuff together.
Right.
And deciding who, where they're gonna land, in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
What kind of person they're gonna be. You want to go ahead, Mom?
Yeah, I guess I'll give it a try and see what happens.
Okay.
And I've been recording this whole time, so maybe we can use some of the stuff we just talked about, or we'll see.
Well, depending
Yeah.
if,
We'll see how the conversation goes,
maybe
Sure, absolutely.
some of it.
or we could certainly re-talk about it during our speech.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get started. We've done the intro, so let's just go into it. Second, okay.
Well, are you sure that it wasn't started? when
Yeah,
we did?
I don't know about that. So maybe
Well, you want to
should-
just
Do it again.
maybe just
Do it
kind of
again.
start from the beginning, and then you can
Start
cut
over.
Sure.
the first
Yeah.
part of the recording if you don't need it.
Yeah, more practice never hurts. Um, Hi, this is the Journey Series podcast on Mark for Glory and the Media.
Hi.
My name is Mark. I'm with Krystal, and today we're recording episode number 35. It's actually episode number 35. I think we said that last time, but we were wrong. But today we're having a very special guest, Mary Collins, and she's here to talk to us about her MS diagnosis and her journey and how she's moving forward with her life. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Krystal. I think it's great. This is episode 35 because I was 35 when I was diagnosed with MS.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm 63 now. I've been really, really fortunate because except for the first year after diagnosis, when I was doing a lot of intentional changes in my diet, lifestyle, trying to detox my body and listen to what it was trying to tell me, I've been pretty much symptom-free that whole time. But it isn't a fluke or like a spontaneous something. It's a very conscious day-by-day action. So in my case, I'm actually grateful for the diagnosis because it really made me stop in what was the middle of my life and say, what are the things that I would really value having in my life? And what are the things that I would miss out on if I were not able to, continue in my life?
If you don't mind, just start us off at the beginning, maybe tell us a bit about what your life was like before you got diagnosed, how life was like for you going through the diagnostic process.
Okay.
Let's start there.
So I was working with a business that did trade shows and mail order. And so we would sometimes, well, up to 27 weekends a year, we were on the road, you know, planes and vans or whatever, getting to these trade shows. So that in and of itself was probably pretty disruptive of my sleep and, you know, not the healthiest lifestyle. Probably the year leading up to that, I'd been working with that company for 11 years and I liked some of the people who were involved with it, but I really was ready to do something different. And I think I was kind of inside afraid to make a change. So I was just kind of stuck. And we were going to be doing a big trade show in Scandinavia that we'd been planning for 2 years, you know, like a week. And all of a sudden, one morning at work, my left eye was twitching and then it was blurry and I couldn't see very well. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just stressed. So, you know, went home a little early, rested. Next morning, same thing. It was a little bit worse. So it was a Friday and I have worn glasses or corrected lenses since 3rd grade. So, you know, I had regular eye doctor and I called them that morning on Friday and they said, well, we normally close at noon on Friday, but we'll see you. And I was probably only there about 10 minutes and they sent me over to the university neurology, ophthalmology department. And I was able to drive myself. I mean, my vision wasn't that bad. But the whole way over there, I mean, this all happened so quickly, I really wasn't even thinking about it. I was just, well, okay. And they spent hours on Friday afternoon doing all different kinds of testing and looking at my eyes and various things. And I think it was about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, they said, we want to send you over for an MRI tonight. And since it was April, it was, you know, dark fairly early. So I went over there and the technician said, have you ever had an MRI before? Do you know anything about it? And I said, no. And he didn't really give me any sense of what it would be like. And so I just remember being in that tube, you know, by myself. And he said it could get loud and don't move. And I was just pretty terrified. You know, it sort of seems like you're under like gunfire or something, at least in 1995 it did. And so Monday morning I went back and met with a team of neurologists and they said, yeah, you have all these lesions on your brain and your central nervous system. And, you know, it's pretty conclusively MS. But at that time, they wanted you to have 2 symptoms, and I only had 1 symptom, which was the ocular neuritis, which is often the first thing that causes people to get a diagnosis. And I had to go on this big trade show to Scandinavia the following week. So I got it together and, you know, it was just kind of a blur. And the first 3 of the 4 weeks that I was in Scandinavia, I was dealing with the ocular neuritis. I was starting to have fatigue. Plus, there's just the stress of the diagnosis of, you know, what's going to happen to me.
Right.
So, but I had told the neurologist as I was leaving their office, I'm going to heal from this. And I was really determined. So the last week that I was in Finland, I was out touring around and I went to this castle called Turku Castle. And they had a display in Finnish and Swedish and English about the plague. And I thought, that's kind of appropriate and weird. And as I walked out of this dark castle, I realized that my vision was back. I could see. And so when I got back to the United States and I went back to see the neurologist, as they had said, they said, well, you didn't take the IV steroids, did you? No, you didn't do anything. They said, oh, well, we didn't tell you then, but, you know, most people don't get their vision back like that. And, you know, if they do, it takes a long time or whatever. So, anyway, that, then I just really focused in on getting better. And after about 2 months, my employer of 11 years and I, who were also very good friends, mutually decided that I would just take a few months severance and leave the company because I really didn't want it. So again, that was kind of a forced but positive thing because I really didn't want to be doing it anymore. And he was terrified that I would get really sick and then he'd have to deal with that. So that was that. And then I just really, began focusing on diet. I eliminated gluten, I eliminated dairy. I started adding a lot more local fresh foods. And I know you don't want to talk about specifics and I won't, but I'm just saying main point is I followed my own inner guidance and reading materials I found and thought, well, this can't hurt. And so over a period of a few months, I think I learned a lot about my relationship to my body and my stress level and all that.
Can we unpack that for a minute? I mean,
Sure.
So I think a lot of whatever methodology an individual takes to get better, that's kind of irrelevant. But we're kind of talked out of by like society and like the medical establishment and whatever, that science is the be all and the end all of everything. Don't trust yourself because we know what's best for you, right?
For sure.
All right, well, with this, we want you to explain your journey and what you did. We just don't want you to try to sell somebody on what works for you and make them want to, you can suggest things and talk about it. You can suggest things and talk about you, that's fine.
Sure.
We just didn't know where you were going and what you were about, because we've talked to so many people that
Right.
are, gung ho about, they actually think that they want to pretend like they're in the disability community, but what they really want to do is sell their product.
Oh, I don't like that either. And I've actually had some challenges within my own MS community because I'm super happy for anyone who gets better or feels better.
Right.
But there are a couple people in particular that have a certain theory and it's based on their experience, but then they try to translate that into some kind of universal thing. And I don't agree with that. I think if there's one thing that I would say is, a person's mindset and ability to listen to whatever messages they may be receiving from the experience, which is a very individual process.
We want to hear it all. Everybody's,
one thing that I did,
everybody's not the same.
One thing I did early on, which I later made a joke out of, was I was in a health food store and they were promoting flaxseed oil. And I had decided, okay, I'll read this little brochure. Again, it's 1995. They didn't have, everything wasn't online and whatnot. I didn't own a computer at that time. And I read the brochure and I thought, well, I've been thinking about omega-3 fats that, I'd like to get a little more of that in my diet. So I did what I always do. I did like a triple check. I took the initial information, then I tried to verify that independently somewhere else. And I thought, okay, well, I don't see any downside to that. So for a few weeks, I was, having like a couple tablespoons of this cold pressed refrigerated flaxseed oil a day. And so later I got a personal license plate flaxseed. And so to me, that was just kind of,
You're saying flaxseed, right?
I'm not selling anything flaxseed, but it was kind of a joke because people would say, what's that license plate about?
Mhm.
And, you know, it was to me that the thing was that people were coming and saying, how many tablespoons was it? And what did you eat it with? And whatever. And I said, it's not about that. It's about that I was
Yeah.
led to research this and I did it and I did it for me and it seemed to be effective. But I don't know if it was effective or not.
Right.
Yeah, you'd be surprised of the things I have around here that I've tried at one time. And, you know, like flaxseed, I feel like for me, you know, it was, so it might have worked for a short time, but then it made me feel full. So, and it made me sick to my stomach after a while.
Right.
So of course I had to stop that and move on to something else.
And
Sure.
I think what we're really trying to communicate to people here is that that everyone's on their own journey and it's okay to trust your own experience. Like just because in a book somewhere it's scientifically proven to work doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. Everyone is their own unique little microcosm, and
Mhm.
they're all these factors in their environment are contributing to the success or failure of any one thing, right?
And everybody's digestive system and stomach is different. So, you know, nothing is the same in any person.
And that trusting yourself doesn't just come down to diet. I mean, there you could take any aspect of the society. People use it with religion, like this religion works for me, therefore I'm gonna beat it over the head of everyone around because it's going to work for everyone. And the reason I know is because it works for me.
Yeah, I think that one of the big things for me is this, what I see as a kind of a conflict of interest, maybe that if I'm supposed to be trying to help somebody become more empowered, I can't really do that in an unbiased way if my livelihood depends on my convincing them to buy a certain thing from me or follow a certain program.
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned when we talked before, but I had a kind of interesting situation too. In 1982, for 7 years, excuse me, 5 years, sorry, 5 years, I lived with a registered nurse who had MS. And I was brought in after she'd had a surgery for a pretty serious pressure sore situation. And she was recovering, but wasn't able to drive. And she needed somebody to prepare her meals and help her with bathing. And I had been working with an agency that hired non-medical assistants to help people with disabilities. And I'd been working with it on a kind of come-in basis with a bunch of different people. And I really enjoyed that experience tremendously. I just learned so much from all of the people that I dealt with. But they contacted me and said, we need a live-in situation. Would you consider it? So I interviewed with her, and because she was a registered nurse, she was very capable of showing me how to do, you know, any minor thing that she needed help with. So the 4th year that I lived with her, I said, I'm going to have to leave because, you know, I want to have a life of my own, but I also saw her as like the poster child for medicine. She worked at the University Hospital where we lived, and she was constantly taking, you know, all different kinds of drugs and things. And she also smoked cigarettes and, you know, drank hard liquor. And she just kind of wasn't receptive to anything that I thought was about, you know, kind of living a more full life. And so I realized that I was not gonna, it wouldn't be good for me, you know, at that point in my late 20s to continue being kind of isolated and living with her, even though at that point I did have a career as well, because she didn't need me all day. So I was only there, you know, evenings and weekends. but still, it was just, I think while living with her, I thought, if anything like this ever happens to me, I'm really going to approach it differently. And I have no reason to believe that that connection happened for any other reason. I mean, we don't know MS to be contagious in any way. There were many years between, the time I was around her and when I was diagnosed. I don't know, you could say it was just like a woo-woo spiritual foreshadowing. Doesn't matter. The point is that it did kind of prepare me because I knew something about what MS was, but also I knew how I didn't want to approach it.
And there was something I was thinking. So I know that with certain chronic diseases, that sometimes they are more prevalent in people who live or work in high stress conditions,
Mhm.
and they seem to be more prone to this sort of thing. How true is that for you?
Well, I definitely had that kind of lifestyle. And I've met several people with MS, more women than men. I think statistically there is a slightly higher percentage of women than men, not a huge difference. Every single one of these women I would describe as an overachiever type A personality. And I don't think I thought of myself that way, but when I look back on it, I realized that I always felt like I had to be very successful by some kind of outside measure to overcome, maybe some of my family issues or whatever. I don't know. But my, so this isn't any kind of scientific data collection process, but my sense is that, yes, not only high stress, but a person who's very hard on themselves demands a lot of self and maybe isn't very good about self-care. So one of the first things with MS was, I had this extreme fatigue. I would feel like somebody had put a pallet on me, with a whole load of bricks, and just getting up was that difficult. And so I tried to find balance between resting and then, pushing myself a little bit. But the whole time I was just more focused on self-care than I had ever been in my entire life. I made sure I was eating well. I made sure I was, the things that I decided I needed to do for myself, I was going to get them done. But not in a, type A way, more in a low key way.
Chris, do you have any?
No, I think you're doing awesome. So, what was the when you left working with her, you said you did what afterwards?
Well, so then I had a business career. I had already had a business degree, and so I was able to get a career position while I was living with her. And then I left that position and I ended up working with the company I mentioned that I was still with 11 years later after the MS diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
And we had moved that company from one state to where we are now by choice after a kind of lengthy process of looking at different places. And so after diagnosis, I decided, you know what? I always liked being an au pair and a nanny when I was in college. Let me check into that. And I was hired by a single mom with a 10-year-old who attended a private school, daytime private school. And I was very forthright with her about my situation. And I said, I might need a nap in the afternoon or whatever, but I assure you I can be, very responsible with your daughter. She'll be very safe. A lot of times she had business meetings in the evening or things she had to do. So she needed somebody to be there 24/7. And it was a good experience because I really got tuned back into sort of the joy about being around kids. And I did that for 6 years. And in the last year that I did it, I met my current husband of 23 years. He was a colleague of a woman that I was working for as a nanny. And apparently he was so impressed that she trusted me enough to leave her infant at home and come into the office, that he wanted to know who was this magic woman who was, making her calm and comfortable to go back to work. And so she decided to fix us up. And it worked out very well.
Oh,
So I became an instant stepmom and then a biological mom a year later.
oh,
I think that kids of a certain age, obviously, I'm talking about teenagers, but I mean young kids and animals certainly are very perceptive or attuned to, even though it's not verbalized or expressed to them, they're very keenly aware of what's going on and how they need to handle it, treat you, and they don't know, they don't like, obviously kids are always honest, right?
Yeah.
But they they don't really, we as adults sometimes we have all these things that we engage in. We just this kind of like we treat everyone like over delicately, and we I don't know, they just don't have any of those filters or those things that they go through, right? They're
Oh,
just kind of
absolutely.
pure that way.
Yeah. And, it was fun because there were a lot of kids in this neighborhood. I would say probably ranging in age from 3 or 4 to, mostly young teenagers. And some of the boys would be out playing, hockey on the street, or somebody be on rollerblades or whatever. And they'd say, "Oh, come on and, do this." And I found myself not saying, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to fall on my face or whatever." It really, I found it very healing. It was a combination of being able to do something worthwhile and contributing that wasn't stressing me out, that was the opposite. Sometimes the parents stressed me out a little bit, but the kids were fine. And then also just engaging with the joy of children, having fun and playing.
And yeah, and they're also a lot freer, and they're not overburdened by the stuff adults are burdened by, right?
Right.
They don't have all that stuff to think about.
Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think some of them do.
Yeah,
Depends on the parents, and what the
Yeah,
parents'
right.
expectations are. But yeah, it was a great journey. Also, I think that the other piece of it, which I had learned somewhat when I was helping people through access to independence, but also learned is in this country, United States particularly, domestic types of services, people don't generally know how to deal with that. And, people would say, you have a college degree, why are you doing that? And I said, because I enjoy it, because it's what I want to be doing right now. And so again, it sort of got me outside of that box of this is what society expects of you at a certain point in your life. And being a bit older than the typical nanny, I also had the benefit of a lot more patience and a lot more life experience.
Right.
So, I had no problem keeping jobs. Let's put it that way. I was in high demand.
And this my own opinion, like if a lot of these diseases are made worse by being under stress, why would you want to seek a job that you don't really want to do and isn't within your life purpose to be doing, right?
Well,
It would seem
right.
that would just add to your stress.
I think that's true, but again, in the MS community, I find a lot of people that I don't know well or personally, but they're just commenting, I'm so afraid that I'm not going to be able to provide for myself. And so, I think about the quality of life. And, when I was lying there feeling like I could barely get up, what I was thinking about wasn't, oh, I sure hope I have enough, insurance to last me till I'm 95. I was thinking about, I'd like to have a nice relationship with somebody. I'd like to have the joy of being a parent, maybe. These are the things that were, and so I started putting my focus on that. And, it worked out. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a life plan, but sometimes I think we do get a little over focused on it.
I think some people go out of their way to make sure that underprivileged people are people that have gone through domestic violence or whatever. Go out of their way to make sure they stay down and don't get the help they need and don't have the resources they need always, or make it hard to get if it is available. And financially get that, well, that's a whole nother thing. People,
Sure.
especially big companies and whatnot, they don't care about whatever situation you're going through. They just want their money, and they are a lot of times very greedy, and the money that is available, well, we have to shell it over directly to them, to those big companies. And so the advantages, maybe like you were saying, you wanted to have kids, get married, of course, have your own home, stuff like that. Well, if those things are issues, then you don't have much to work with and you're not going to be successful with stuff.
Well, I agree with what you're saying too about how society views other people. I find particularly in our town, which is undergoing a huge change, housing prices are, doubling, tripling. I mean, it used to be a very affordable, middle class sort of family oriented town. We live in a very modest house that is fully paid for. And the only reason it is because what it cost at the time that my husband first got it. But he's a frugal person and so am I. But those opportunities are not out there right now for other people. And I find a lot of people that I know them socially, they're not close friends, but they'll say something like, well, and I think this is an inner fear that they probably are projecting. Well, I worked hard and I deserve what I have. Yeah. So then I will challenge them and say, well, you mean the other person doesn't deserve that? They're not equally worthy of whatever. Well, I'm not saying that, but I think people want to believe that if somebody is different in some way and seemingly has a harder time of it, they want to somehow rationalize that. That difference, as you were saying, that in one way or another. And so one of the things that's definitely happened for me is I feel it's kind of my responsibility to be a spokesperson at times for people who don't have a voice in situations and say, I know how fortunate I am. Do you realize how fortunate you are? And maybe you have more capacity to be kind or help or do something than you realize you do.
I think this is one key area where, like, the medical establishment and society as a whole kind of fall short. I mean, there's been some progress, but there's this impression that where's it going now? I was trying to change the thought. Okay, give me a second. Going with this. Okay. So, that hasn't happened. Well, like
A long time. I don't know, you were talking and I,
Yeah.
okay, where did it go?
Well, we're definitely gonna cut that part out.
No, well, you are, I'm not.
But oh yeah, here we go. Okay.
Okay.
So I was thinking that, you know, there's this pressure or this subconscious messaging that's been sent to us that, okay, there's this subconscious messaging that's been sent to us that that medicine is the be all and the end all of everything, and that we can't possibly have the cure or the within us. And from what I can see, medicines and stuff like that, and all these therapies are like sort of like they're great for urgent care kind of stuff. Like you fall off your bike, you scrape your knee, get hit by a car. Sure, there's medicine that's gonna give you immediate relief and stop and really help you, right? But when it comes to chronic conditions, they're much less informed, and it seems to me that the cure isn't necessarily in treating symptoms, it's treating the behaviors and the thinking and the that causes the symptoms in the first place. What would you say about that? Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded question. I was trying to, the little person in my head was trying to stumble around and find the pathway to my original thought, and it was not coming to me.
Life with him, interesting.
Yeah.
I completely, agree. And of course, I had, again, that unusual experience of having lived with somebody who was taking every kind of thing at the time that was available. And we had one situation, well, we had two situations that I think were kind of amusing. At one point when I was driving her, before she got hand controls, I was driving her to the hospital. There was this really dapper looking guy in a wheelchair who would be coming around, and I was like, kind of elbowing her and say, wow, I wonder who he is, whatever. So finally he came over to our vehicle one day. He wanted to ask me out because he had seen her in action when she was sort of complaining and fussing. He liked the way I handled it. So I declined it, not because he was in a wheelchair, but because he was probably about 10 to 15 years older than I was. And I just didn't see it fitting right, for where I was in my life. And he took it very well. But then later I suggested to my roommate, I said, they have this accessible outdoor recreation program. The city we lived in had phenomenal accessibility programs. And she said, I'm not one of those people. And I said, what do you mean you're not one of those people? And that was kind of like the beginning of the end, because I really felt like, and so I think I'm coming back around where, because of all of her medical training and because she had been an oncology nurse, she tended to have that mindset that, science and medicine was the answer. And after I lived with her for a year, I knew how depressed she was, that a major relationship had ended right before her symptoms started. And, she wasn't exploring any of those things. She was only looking at it as, this is a physical manifestation and I'm going to do those things.
Just a second, oh, now I'm the weed eater.
Okay.
Oh, God. Hold on. The window here in the big, so they can't be here long.
Okay.
So you were maybe you should pick it up where you were talking about your roommate.
Yeah. So, I got to see, living with her for 5 years, somebody who had completely turned over every aspect of, first, the diagnosis was accepted. I mean, I wasn't with her at the beginning, but I could just tell that because of her mindset, it was, okay, I've got this diagnosis and that means X, it's going to go this way or it's going to go that way. And I'm going to take all the medications that they have available that will give me some kind of symptomatic relief or whatever. But she wasn't interested in trying to do any physical therapy, any type of exercise, any type of anything. And her life had become very, very small. I mean, she was an important person at the hospital because she got an administrative job after getting a master's degree, which is fine. That's great. But she had that life and then coming home. And, there really wasn't much joy in her life. And so it was a huge opportunity for me to say, I really wouldn't want to live that way, because it's not much living when you're just sort of cutting yourself off from any kind of possibilities. So when I was diagnosed, I had the advantage of having at least some awareness of what MS was. I wasn't totally shocked, but I also knew, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that thing because I already know what that's like. And, and the neurologists were very kind, but they were also very patronizing. And they had this wheelchair sort of in the corner of their examining room. And they'd say, well, when you need us, and they'd keep looking over at the wheelchair, come back. And I also went to a support group that was at the hospital. And they did it for about 4 months. And it was really sad to me to see, not that people were coming and sharing and whatnot. I didn't have a problem with that. But there were some people that it was the same really downer thing every single time. And so then it would become my turn and I would say, well, this week I'm exploring this thing. I'm checking into that. And so finally the neurology nurse that led the group called me over at the end of the meeting and she said, you're upsetting the other patients. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, you seem to be getting better and you're doing stuff. And so I was happy not to continue. I've tried 2 other groups since several years later, found a kind of a similar thing. And again, we all need places to commiserate and share things. I get it, but it just the mindset was not about let's make the most of it or improve our quality of life. It was more let's just focus on the problems and the negatives.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is impressed upon us by society. Like if you're gravely sick or if you have a disability, then something's wrong with you. You're not perfect, and you have to be pushed off in the corner somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a really unfortunate place where we are in our society, that we're not taught to value the contribution that people make in other ways. It's got to be, for the most part, your value is your title or your salary or, how much stuff you have, and not, I was really fortunate that I had, women in my history, my grandmother and my paternal grandmother in particular, who never worked. I mean, she had a college degree because she was a minister's daughter, and that was something she was able to get. Very, very bright person. But she would go and stay at the homes of somebody who was sick for, 3 weeks or a month, and just provide, whatever domestic services were needed. And she was a highly respected member of her community, very, very authentically doing herself. And so I feel like you know, we've kind of that, and I don't mean that to be sexist. It could be a male doing that, a female doing it, anyone. It's just the idea that we've come to a place in society where like all those things now have to be hired. You have to hire somebody to come and do that, you know, and you don't, it's not just, you know, being a homemaker or whatever is considered to be. I always had people ask me like, what did you do before? Or what are your degrees in? And I'd say, well, what does that matter? We're at the playground with our kids right now. Is that relevant to what we're doing in this moment?
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, society is so stuck on who we are and what our successes are what we have materialistically or what degree we hold. And I mean, even if you do have a degree, you know, there are people that are very humble about it, and there are people that will like plastered everywhere, let you know that they're in charge and you need to listen to them and they know everything. And then that's it. I don't understand how people are okay with that going forward, how that hasn't worked in the past. So why are people wanting that to still be a thing?
And it's funny, I mean, this, no, I'm talking about more scientifically minded people will push this idea of evolution, which I'm not discounting in any way as true, but people who are trying to sell this thing called evolution, but subscribe to a way of living which is very tribalistic. Like you don't fit, you don't, you fit in this box, therefore we're going to ostracize you and put you away from the tribe to keep us safe or whatever. It's just very, very divisive and very, I don't know. I'm sure we could talk a lot about this.
Well, and I find, you know, in my community right now, I'm quite into environmental things. I'm part of a group of people who are planting native trees and native fruits for birds. And we're just trying to carve out some part of this big urban area that's natural and somewhat, you know, habitat. And I've had several people say, you know, well, that's so extreme. Or they're literally concerned about what their parents or they're grown-ups, but what their parents or their in-laws will think if they are, you know, in some kind of fringe hippie group of people that is going out and, you know, planting trees. And or, you know, we're not going to say anything to the town council about something that we would like because we don't want to appear to be complaining. And I guess I really feel like I'm hoping that we may have a more collaborative sharing society, and hopefully it'll happen in a lifetime, because as you were saying, Krystal, what we've been doing is for, you know, what, at least a few hundred years or a few thousand years hasn't really worked out very well overall.
Or it worked for a short period, but surely we've evolved past the need to exchange money for services or goods. I mean, obviously that probably is maybe still necessary, but I mean, just the thinking and the emotions behind the greed and the selfishness that gets promoted, we need to evolve past that.
Yeah, because like I said, we've gotten into that's made us acceptable who that matters who we are, you know. Our existence depends on what we have materially or, you know, what degree we have. And, you know, people need to get past that.
Right.
And we had a guest recently that we talked about that very thing, that there are people in younger generations that are starting work that are afraid to tell what they know and what they want to do and their ideas, because there's older generations that are stuck in their ways and not giving them an opportunity, and oftentimes, you know, slandering them and cutting them down, you know, and not letting them. So, you know, why isn't the some of the older generation not taken into account that, hey, you know, we were young ones too, and some of our ideas are really good. You know, how about, what if they want to take what we started and just make it better? What's wrong with that? Instead of keeping it no change, everything is the same. And I'm sorry, but what you started is not working anymore. We've evolved.
Well, I do find in the local food movement around our city, a lot of young people. I'm really impressed with a lot of people between the ages of, say, 25 and 35 who are saying, I don't want that lifestyle that my parents basically have spent their whole lives, you know, accumulating and working and not really having any leisure time or community or anything meaningful. I want something different. And I'm fortunate to get to meet those people. And I do try to be exactly what you're saying. I'll say, hey, you know, even though I'm older, I really value what you're bringing to the situation. And I want to hear what your ideas are. And sometimes, you know, my joke is I'm a late boomer because I was born in 1959. So I'm kind of at the end of that. But as a late boomer, I do get those criticisms and jokes about, you know, you ruined the planet for us. You did this and you did that. And I say, well, I'll take responsibility for, you know, my part of it. But, you know, I can also say, well, you didn't understand what our parents were like, you know.
Right.
So I think we have to be able to look kind of at cycles and look forward and look backward, but also realize that I like being with people of different ages. I want that. I think the worst thing I could imagine would be put in a facility where everybody in there was an old person. You know, I wouldn't want that because it wouldn't be as interesting.
Yeah, I think that's all where it starts. You know, people need to first put them, you know, be accountable, and acceptance, realizing that, hey, we've done our best with what we had, and now we have a new generation coming up, and even the ones now, or, you know, in the last 15, 20 years, you know, that are wanting to make our lives better and have new ideas, you know, and that's how society is supposed to work. But people are, you know, they're so, you know, I keep using the word go, but there's, you know, they don't want change. They want it to stay the same.
Yeah, I think part of that, you know, is something I've thought about a lot in my life is if you say, well, I can see another way to do it, or maybe we could do it differently or better, is that somehow admitting that you were wrong, or that, you know, everything you've done has been a waste of time? I don't know. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, oh, good, you know, here's an opportunity to start something new and, you know, be be flexible. But I think for some people, and maybe it's something that's come through society indoctrinating them, or institutions or family or something, that this idea that, you have to defend what you're doing and keep doing the same thing because that validates everything up to that point. I would like to see, some leaders and like political leaders and corporate heads, and then just come out and say, announcement, we made a mistake.
For sure.
We were wrong about something.
Amazing.
We've changed our mind and now we are going to do it this way because we think this is better. Or we'd really like to hear what you would like us to do.
Okay.
Because there's so much time spent on, I think, pushing out some product or service or idea and saying, this is what's best for you.
Yeah. And I'm just starting to learn that myself. There's so much of that in the world where people see someone who maybe in their judgment and needs help, right? And so they try to help that person, but not in the way that person wants their help, or in the way that person wants things done, which would be the most helpful to them. Usually the helper is trying to push their agenda, and I include myself in the subject because I can see now that it's been pointed out to me that sometimes the helper pushes their own agenda on the person and says, I can help, but no, we got to do it my way because my way is the best way, or whatever, some ego-driven thing. And yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm out at like a park or someplace, I'll see somebody who has some equipment or, a cane or wheelchair, whatever, they're getting in and out of their car. And because of all the years of experience I had with people who had different equipment, I'll just kind of, stand back and say, I won't say anything, or I might say, is there anything I could do? Or, anything I could help with or anything. And usually I would say 85% of the time I get a very pleasant, no thanks, or thanks for asking. And sometimes I get a little bit less pleasant response. And I don't even say anything in most situations if it's obvious the person is doing their thing. It's just sometimes there's like an awkward heavy door on a bathroom or something. But I always, ask first, because I know I learned, that you can actually mess somebody up, who's they got their thing going on and they're doing it their way, and you just jump in there and intercede, and it's really unwanted.
A lot of times, I think that people, they may have good intentions of wanting to help and be nice and be good, but there's this deeply seated ego thing that wants to be the hero, right? Wants to rescue the princess or whatever, or take the guy that needs help and like help him and change him or whatever. No.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's easily changeable, but
No.
it definitely exists.
A few weeks ago, when we're talking with you, we also discussed the added stresses of wanting to explain how they're a person with a disability. Maybe they have ideas or things they want to help advance or, but the neurotypical people in society often push down people with a disability. So, especially when they suggest something that might work or might not work. So how do you propose that we should go forward with trying to explain with having a disability, how we should talk to people? And first they have to get over their ego, right? When somebody has a disability, being able to communicate with them and without using any passive aggressive talk or whatever, first they have to get to that point. And then, when you can maturely have a conversation between the two neurotypical and then the neurodivergent, when we can do that, then then we can work together, make changes or try things or whatever. What do you think is the best way to do that?
Well, I'm certainly, not an expert on that topic. There were months and periods of time when I had some issues with, really serious, what I would call brain fog, where it was hard for me to formulate my ideas. Sometimes, my speech was affected a little bit. But my observation from working with different people, and then some children and young people that I've been around, who have different neurotypes as far as learning or whatever, is sometimes it's helpful to have someone there who is, I wouldn't say advocating, but just sort of eliminating misconceptions or, any kind of like bully factor, for lack of a better word, that might happen. I've seen that done really well. And I had a couple that I worked with that had cerebral palsy. And I noticed that when we were alone together in their apartment, we were just, laughing and talking, and the little tics and issues that would come up when he was out, maybe trying to get the bus or get to his job at the hospital in the coffee shop or whatever, they were pretty much gone. But they, their parents didn't want them to get married because of their differences. They really were hilarious and had brilliant things to say. And I considered myself fortunate to be able to spend time with them. And so I think that it's kind of a matter of just educating people in a way that so they'll understand that just because this person speaks differently or appears differently, this does not mean that you are condescending to that person or that you assume that the quality of what they have to contribute to this conversation is somehow limited by that, because it isn't. So, that's
if you have to, just because you have trouble understanding them, or they're slower at their thought process or whatever, doesn't mean that those ideas aren't there. There's over the past few years, I've talked to so many disabled people that have amazing ideas and amazing thoughts and things they want to get out. And they have ideas about that would really contribute a lot to companies and, ideas about going forward in the future, for society. but they often can't get out what they want to say and what they want to do, you know, and that's really sad. And that's part of what we're doing. We're giving people a platform to be able to talk and explain their, you know, what they are about and what they know and what they love. You know, their what's worked for them, their journey, you know.
Absolutely. And I think there's another, you know, form of discrimination that happens too, which is ageism. And I've been very fortunate that my grandparents lived to be, my paternal grandparents, 93, and they were both incredibly sharp people my entire life. So I only knew them, you know, from 70s to 90s. But as I'm going toward that point in life, I'm realizing that, you know, there's wisdom from all different kinds of paths and experiences. And I think that our society really tends to keep programming us to think that you have to look a certain way and you can't have wrinkles and gray hair, or, you know.
Have to have this and you have to look like this.
Right.
And you have to
Those are the
that.
people that represent us. And in fact, you know, it isn't that way. And so I'm hoping that I can be part of, through these local activities, having communities that really are inclusive. And I have to also say that I get a little annoyed with what I think is sort of superficial virtue talk and virtue signaling now that isn't necessarily of substance. When I say inclusive, I mean inclusive, not just we can check off the initials or the right this or that, and, you know, that's been taken care of.
Yeah, that makes me so mad. You cannot be, just because you can get in the door somewhere and maybe go to the bathroom, maybe doesn't mean that your company or your service is inclusive. You know, you're only doing it because you're legally supposed to do it.
Right.
So you're not tricking anyone, you know.
Well, I guess before we go here, maybe can you talk about some of the stuff you're working on that we can expect from you? Or, I mean, expect is a heavy-handed word. I mean, no pressure or anything. But I mean, just maybe fill us in on if you're working on anything that you want to share.
Okay. Well, about, I guess it was last spring, in a rather short period of time, I wrote kind of a memoir about my healing experience. And I started recording it as an audio book with someone I know who was a sound engineer, and then that kind of ended. And I thought about it and I realized, you know, I've shared excerpts of this in some local 2-hour workshops where people are coming and they're learning about local food, and we talk a lot about following one's own inner guidance on what they want, what you want to add or try or whatever. It's not about a prescribed diet, but I do tend to be, you know, mostly plant-based. So that's a bit of a push I try to make on, you know, eating a lot of varied plant foods. But anyway, I found that worked really well as kind of a discussion prompter. And so what I've decided to do with the book is try to do some cohorts of people who are working on some kind of healing journey, or perhaps it could be expanded to just dealing with some kind of change, and use the book as kind of a framework for conversation. So that's where that stands right now. I felt that if I just published it, which I don't know how I would do that, but I've done a little research, it would be another book that somebody can say, okay, I'll put that on my shelf and I'll get to it later. And I want it to just kind of keep evolving and being updated. And then just this morning, I decided to sign up for a form of, it's a special type of hypnotherapy that basically just kind of helps people to maybe discover or release things that could be contributing factors to illness, stress, anything. And so this is a program that someone developed and did for many years, and she's passed away, but her daughter, who's a nurse, has continued the program, and it's online. So for some reason, the last couple of years, I feel like I'm in a transition from, being mom to being more of a community person. And I'm doing a lot of local kind of activism. But there's also a sense on my part that there really isn't any super urgency to this, that it's about being patient and sort of letting these things unfold. So I'm trying to trust that process and, know that the timing will be right when it is.
You had said before when you're gonna start that program, when are you doing that?
The hypnotherapy program?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually an online program at the first level, and I spent several hours working on it today. So I'm, really going to try to complete it in 2 to 3 months, which is a pace that is extremely realistic. And then after I finish it, I'll do 10, there's a written test, and then I'll do 10 sessions to sort of, and document the sessions so that I can demonstrate that. And then there are another 15 sessions. And at that point, I'm, a practitioner of the first level 1 practitioner. So that just seemed like a tool in the toolbox. I really love to cook with local foods. That's one of my passions. I do a lot of cooking for people, friends and whatnot, drop off meals. And so I'm not sure, what it's going to look like, but this is like my third act. I had my business career, I had my healing journey, then I've been a mom and wife, and I'm still happy to be those things, but I feel like it's time for me to do something else that brings in all those pieces.
Yeah. That's an exciting time.
Well, certainly it has been a very enlightening conversation, and it's very stimulating, and I hope other people out there got a lot out of it. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Thanks for your time today, and well, actually, one more thing before I forgot. Where can people reach you if they wanted to talk to you more? Is that possible?
Yes, it's possible. I think probably the best way to contact me is by email. And my email address is veganmaryc, the letter C, @gmail.com. And, maybe they put it in the subject, heard you on Mark and Krystal's program or something like that. I try to respond to people pretty promptly, and I will also be glad to, do like a cell phone call or something. I find in general that usually people feel pretty encouraged, when they talk to me, but I'm not an official coach, nor do I want to be. I am not selling any products or services at this time. But, I'm definitely more than happy to connect with anybody.
Great.
Also, I have one more thing. Also, you have your Facebook group that I I couldn't get in it to look at it. I have to be approved, but it's about your book, correct?
Right. So the title of my book is Epiphany, and my healing journey of MS from A to Z. So I started a Facebook page, excuse me, to sort of update the progress on that. And I'm not posting in there very frequently right now because that is a little bit tabled.
Yeah.
But I can certainly email you that information.
Like I said before, it was great for you to join us. Thank you for spending some time to talk about your story, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
And this, oh, I think we're done. Never mind. I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay. Have a good day, Mary.
Bye.
Okay, bye guys.